Lady Valara stood at the edge of the great hall, her heart pounding like a drum. The walls shimmered with the soft light of Zerith's twin moons, reflecting off her skin in waves of silver and gold. She had always loved the beauty of her world, the way light danced on everything and made it feel alive. But tonight, even the brilliance of her home could not calm the storm inside her. She was about to meet him, the human she had been forced to marry. The thought made her stomach twist with dread. Her people, the Zerithians, were elegant, graceful and proud. They valued harmony, knowledge and control over their emotions. But humans were different. They were loud, clumsy, messy. They lacked the subtlety her people prided themselves on. Her mind had painted him as a brute, a creature too crude to understand anything delicate or beautiful. And now she was to be bound to him for life. Valara's parents had spoken little in the last few weeks. Her father's eyes were distant, filled with pride and resignation, while her mother's whispers carried a quiet warning. "He will not be like us," her mother said softly, brushing her silver hair from her face. "You must be careful, humans. They cannot see the world as we do." Valara had tried to imagine what her life would be like with him, but the images that came were filled with discomfort and fear. She saw him laughing too loudly, touching things without care, speaking without thought. She imagined herself trapped, forced to smile at his mistakes, forced to live in a world that would never feel like her own. The thought made her chest ache. As she stepped forward into the hall, her footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Her own reflection shimmered in the glass panels that lined the walls. She saw a tall, elegant figure, every movement precise, every expression controlled. She was everything her people admired. But inside, she felt small, powerless. This human Kale was going to change her life, and she hated him already for it. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and there he was. Kale stood tall, broad-shouldered, and undeniably human. He seemed ordinary at first glance, yet there was something in his posture, something about the calm in his eyes, that made her pause. He did not rush to bow, did not try to overwhelm her with words. He simply stood there waiting, and that waiting made her heart beat faster. He smiled, a small hesitant smile that seemed almost shy. I am Kale," he said, his voice soft but steady. It was not the voice of a conqueror, nor the voice of someone who demanded respect. It was simple, honest, and oddly reassuring. Valara's first instinct was to turn away, to hide her emotions and protect herself. But she found herself unable to look away. His eyes were curious, not judgmental. For the first time, she saw a human not as a threat, but as a person. The elders watched silently from the sides of the hall, their expressions unreadable. They had arranged this marriage to secure peace, to create alliances, to ensure the future of their people. But Valara did not care about duty or politics. All she could feel was fear of the unknown, fear of losing herself, fear of being trapped in a life she did not choose. Kale took a small step forward, careful not to invade her space. "I know this is difficult," he said gently. "I know we come from different worlds. But I promise, I will try to understand you. That is all I can offer." Valara felt a strange warmth stir in her chest, a tiny spark of something she could not name. She wanted to reject him, to flee, to escape this fate that felt like a cage. And yet, there was something in his words, something in his presence, that made her pause. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps he could be different. Not like the humans she had feared, not like the chaos she had imagined, but fear still lingered, heavy and suffocating. She could not ignore it, could not pretend that the dread had vanished. She drew in a shaky breath, straightened her posture, and prepared herself for what she knew would be a long, uncertain journey. A journey that would challenge everything she believed about humans, about herself, and about what it truly meant to live. As Kale extended a tentative hand, Valara looked at it for a long moment. Her heart ached with uncertainty, and yet a tiny, fragile part of her wanted to reach out. She did not yet know if she could trust him, if she could ever love him. But for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this human was not the enemy she had feared, and so, with trembling hands and a heart full of questions, Lady Valara took the first step into a life she had not chosen. Into a story that was just beginning. The morning sun on Zerith rose slowly, casting pale gold light across the shimmering city. Lady Valara could not sleep. Her thoughts were a storm of doubt, fear, and curiosity. She had seen him yesterday, Kale, the human she was bound to by duty, and yet her mind could not settle. She dreaded him still, but something inside her made her want to understand him, even if she would never admit it. When she entered the breakfast chamber, she saw him already there. He was attempting to pour liquid into a delicate crystal cup, and it wobbled in his hand. Valara bit the inside of her cheek to stop a smile. The human was clumsy, exactly as she had imagined, yet there was something endearing in the way he concentrated. He did not notice her at first, too focused on not spilling the drink, his brows furrowed in concentration. I think this is right," he muttered to himself. The cup finally stood upright, though a tiny drop had escaped. Kale glanced up at her and smiled awkwardly. "Good morning, Lady Valara," he said, his voice gentle. It lacked the force or arrogance she had expected. There was no attempt to impress, no attempt to dominate, just a simple greeting, and yet it carried sincerity. Valara hesitated before replying. Her people had warned her about humans, that they were loud, careless, and sometimes dangerous. But here he was, careful and calm, trying to do the small things right. Her first instinct was still fear, yet she could not deny that his manner was different from what she had been told. "Good morning," she said softly, keeping her voice controlled. Her heart beat faster than she cared to admit. She watched him carefully, as one might observe a strange animal in the wild, unsure whether to trust it or run. Kale moved the cup closer to the edge of the table, then set it down carefully. "I hope you like tea," he said, his smile faint but genuine. "It's not like yours, I'm sure, but I tried." Valara stared at the steaming liquid. She could see the effort in his hands, the careful attention he had given to something as simple as a drink. Most beings she had met in her life would not take such care for someone they barely knew. They would have assumed entitlement or looked down on her. But this human, he tried, and that was unusual. "Thank you," she said finally. Her words sounded small, almost fragile, but he nodded as if it mattered deeply. And somehow it did. Somehow his acknowledgement of her presence, his attempt to understand even the tiniest details, made her feel a warmth she had not felt in a long time. They sat in silence for a while, eating breakfast together. Kale spoke softly about simple things, what he remembered from his home, what he had seen on Zereth, questions about her people and their ways. He did not ask intrusive questions. He listened patiently when she explained things. Valara found herself speaking more freely than she had with anyone in years. He did not judge her, did not scoff at her customs, did not dismiss her world as strange. He accepted it, and by doing so, he accepted her. The more she observed him, the more she noticed details that human eyes rarely revealed. His hands were strong but careful. His smile could be hesitant, yet it carried honesty. Even when he stumbled over words or gestures, he never tried to hide it, he simply continued, as if imperfection was not shameful but natural. Valara felt something stirring inside her, a fragile hope that perhaps humans were not as flawed as she had been told. Then came a small moment that would stay in her memory. She reached for a book on the edge of the table, and it began to slip. Kale's hand shot out instinctively and caught it. "Careful," he said, handing it back. His eyes met hers, steady and warm. Valara felt a shiver of surprise, not fear, not anger, but something new. He had acted without hesitation, without expecting reward or thanks. It was simple, ordinary, and yet extraordinary. For the first time, she began to question the stories she had heard. Maybe humans were capable of gentleness, of attention, of kindness in ways her people did not understand. Maybe they could surprise her in ways that were not frightening, but comforting. Valara did not know it yet, but this moment was the first crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Kale had not yet done anything heroic, nothing grand. But he had done something she had never expected. He had seen her, truly seen her, without fear or judgment. And in that quiet breakfast chamber, under the pale light of Zereth's rising sun, Lady Valara felt the smallest, most delicate seed of trust begin to grow. Days passed, and life in the palace continued its quiet rhythm. But Valara's heart had begun to notice things she could not explain. Kale, the human she had dreaded, moved through their shared life with an ease and thoughtfulness that surprised her. He did not force himself into her world. He stepped gently, learning her ways, observing her moods, and adjusting without ever being asked. It was small things at first. He noticed the light she preferred in her chambers, soft and calm, instead of the bright, harsh glow that disturbed her. He arranged the furniture exactly as she liked it, moving objects with care and precision. When Valara entered her room after a long day of obligations and lessons, she would find her books stacked neatly, her favorite cup filled with steaming tea, and a quiet note from him. "I thought you might like this." It was simple, but no one had ever done anything like this for her before. At first, Valara resisted. She was proud, trained to rely on no one, and the idea of someone tending to her needs felt foreign, even uncomfortable. Yet, every time she tried to push him away, Cale's gentle patience reminded her of something she had long forgotten. Trust could exist without weakness. Care did not require subservience. One afternoon, as they walked along the gardens that sparkled with luminescent flowers, Valara tripped over a raised root. In an instant, Cale's hand was around her, steadying her. "You're careful," he said softly, his eyes scanning hers, not with concern alone, but with attention. "I'll always be here, if you need me." The simplicity of his words struck her. No grand promises, no speeches of loyalty or love, just a human offering his presence, a commitment through action rather than declaration. She looked into his eyes and, for a fleeting moment, forgot her fear, her pride, even her resentment. He had done something no one had ever done. He had made her feel safe, even in public. He treated her differently from what she expected. He did not boast about her beauty, nor did he flaunt her as a prize to others. He spoke to her with respect, included her thoughts and decisions, and never dismissed her opinions. Valara noticed how the court whispered about him, how some elders disapproved of a human treating a Zirithian with such equality. But she did not care about their judgments. Cale's care was not meant to impress anyone, it was meant for her, and that was enough. One evening, as a gentle rain fell over the palace, Valara found herself sitting by the window, lost in thought. Cale approached quietly, carrying a small tray with a warm drink. He handed it to her without a word and sat beside her, watching the rain together. The silence was not awkward. It was comforting. Valara felt a strange warmth, a connection she had never experienced before. "You don't have to speak," Cale said after a while. "I know you've been through a lot. I want to be here for you." Valara's chest tightened. No one had ever acknowledged her struggles without judgment or expectation. No one had ever offered her their presence simply to ease her burdens. Her eyes blurred with tears, but she did not look away. She did not want to hide from this feeling that was growing inside her: gratitude, admiration, and maybe something more she dared not name. Yet, the fear remained, whispering in the corners of her mind. Could she trust him completely? Was this care genuine, or would it fade like so many others had? Every time doubt crept in, Cale acted in ways that reminded her of his sincerity. Whether it was adjusting her cloak before a ceremony, waiting for her to finish her studies, or quietly carrying her books when she was too tired, he showed her that he was willing to serve not because he had to, but because he chose to. Valara began to understand that this human, so different from her people, had a strength she had not expected. It was not the strength of skill or power, but the strength of patience, empathy, and consistency. He could have commanded, demanded, or taken, but instead, he gave. He gave respect, he gave attention, he gave care. And in giving, he was teaching her something profound, that even the strongest hearts could find peace and trust in others. By the end of the week, Valara found herself smiling more often in his presence, laughing at his awkward mistakes, and sometimes sharing stories from her past. She still feared him, still doubted, still carried the weight of expectations. But beneath it all, a tiny seed had begun to grow, a seed of hope. A fragile feeling that maybe this human, the one she had dreaded, could become more than an obligation. Cale had not yet won her heart, nor had she given herself completely. But he had done something extraordinary. He had shown her that a human could care in ways no one else ever had. And for Valara, that realization was both terrifying and beautiful. The sky above Zirith darkened as the twin moons disappeared behind thick clouds. Lightning streaked across the horizon, and the wind howled through the palace corridors. Valara stood by the window, staring at the storm outside, her heart mirroring the chaos in the sky. She felt restless, uncertain, and trapped in a life she had not chosen. Cale had been kind, patient, and gentle, yet fear and pride twisted inside her like tangled threads. That evening, the storm seemed to reflect her own emotions. Valara's mind raced with questions she did not want to answer. Could she trust a human? Could she allow herself to feel anything but obligation toward him? And yet, every act of care, every small gesture from Cale, lingered in her mind. The human she had dreaded was now impossible to ignore. Cale approached her quietly, aware that storms were difficult for Zirithians. "Valara, the storm. It's dangerous to be near the windows," he said gently. His voice was calm, yet full of concern. Normally, she would have brushed him off, insisting she was fine, but something in the way he watched her, the patience, the quiet vigilance made her pause. "I am fine," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. I do not need you to worry about me. Kale stepped closer, careful to respect her space. I am not worried. I want to make sure you are safe, he said softly. You don't have to face anything alone. The words struck Valara in an unexpected way. Her chest tightened with conflicting emotions, anger, fear, and a strange, aching longing. She spun around, sparks of frustration glowing faintly around her hands. You do not understand. I cannot. I cannot accept this life, this marriage. I will never belong to a human. Her voice rose, carrying across the chamber like thunder. Kale did not flinch. He did not argue, did not mock. He simply stepped closer, his hands raised slightly in calm surrender. I know it is hard, he said quietly. I know I am not what you expected, and I may never be. But I will not give up on you. Not because I must, but because I choose to. Valara froze. His words were simple, almost ordinary, yet they carried a power stronger than any argument, stronger than the storms outside. For the first time, she felt someone acknowledging her pain, her fear, her pride, not judging it, not dismissing it, but accepting it. And in that moment, something inside her began to shift. The wind rattled the windows, and the room felt charged with energy. Valara's chest heaved as emotions she had long suppressed rose to the surface: fear, confusion, and a fragile spark of trust. Kale stepped forward slowly, allowing her space, yet radiating steady reassurance. I will not force you, he said. I only want to walk beside you, however long it takes. If you allow me, I will be here for you. She looked into his eyes, searching for signs of deceit, of weakness, anything that would confirm her fears. But all she saw was honesty, patience, and a quiet strength she had never expected in a human. It was different from the strength of her people, different from the pride she had been taught to admire. It was gentleness paired with courage, care paired with determination. Valara's hands trembled as she lowered them. Her sparks dimmed, leaving a faint glow in their place. She wanted to retreat, to shield herself from the emotions rising inside her, but she could not. For the first time, she felt the possibility of connection, of understanding, of trust. I do not know if I can, she whispered, her voice breaking. I do not know if I can ever. Kale nodded, stepping closer without touching her. Then we will take it slowly. One step at a time. You do not have to do this alone. Not ever. The storm outside began to soften, rain tapping gently against the glass. Inside, the room was quiet. But Valara felt a different kind of storm settling within her, a storm of hope, uncertainty. And the first flicker of something she had thought impossible: trust in a human. For the first time, Lady Valara realized that the human she had dreaded might not be her captor, her burden, or her enemy. He might be her companion, her ally, and perhaps, if she allowed it, the one who could teach her that even fear could turn into something beautiful. And in the heart of the storm, amidst lightning and wind, Valara took the first fragile step toward letting Kale in, not as an obligation, but as a presence she might one day choose to welcome. The days that followed the storm were quieter, yet heavier in meaning. Valara noticed things she had never truly seen before: the way Kale moved through their palace, not like an outsider, but as someone who cared about its people, its rhythm, its life. He had not changed her world with grand gestures, nor had he demanded that she bend to his ways. Instead, he observed, learned, and adapted, and slowly, Valara began to notice that she could breathe more freely in his presence. One morning, as the first rays of light painted the palace gardens with gold, Kale stood waiting by the bridge over the luminous pond. I thought you might like to see the sunrise, he said, his voice calm, carrying no expectation, only a gentle invitation. Valara hesitated, then stepped forward. She had always loved the gardens, the shimmer of the flowers in the early light. But seeing it shared by someone who cared made it feel different, warmer, safer, almost magical. As they walked together, Kale asked her about the stories of her childhood, the games she had played, the dreams she had nurtured. Valara found herself answering, at first with brief words, then with longer tales, her voice carrying the weight of memories she had hidden for centuries. He listened without interruption, without judgment. When she faltered, he waited patiently. When she smiled, he smiled too, and it was not mockery or forced charm. It was sincere, gentle, and it made her feel seen. Valara began to notice the little things: how Kale remembered her favorite flowers, how he carried her books without spilling a single page, how he adjusted her pillows when she rested. It was as if he studied her not to control, but to understand. Each act, no matter how small, chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One afternoon, a delicate flower in the garden broke under the weight of the wind. Valara reached to catch it, but Kale's hand was faster, holding it carefully. "It's fragile," he said softly, handing it to her. "I wanted to make sure it was safe." She looked at him, startled. No one had ever cared so attentively about something so small, let alone about her reactions to it. She felt a quiet stir of emotion, a mix of gratitude, surprise, and something warmer she had never known before. The more time they spent together, the more Valara began to laugh, a sound rare and treasured in her household. Kale had a clumsy sense of humor, often spilling words or misplacing objects, yet she could not help but smile at his persistence, at his willingness to try even when he failed. Laughter became their bridge. It was a small, ordinary thing, yet it carried with it a growing connection neither could ignore. At night, they often sat together beneath the twin moons, speaking in whispers. Valara shared stories of her people's traditions, her fears, and the dreams she had abandoned. Kale spoke of his home, the humans he had known, the simple joys he had cherished. They found a strange, fragile harmony in their differences. He did not try to change her, and she did not try to change him. Instead, they learned from each other, each lesson planting seeds of trust, respect, and curiosity. One evening, Kale placed a small hand on hers, not in possession, but in quiet reassurance. "I do not need you to love me yet," he said softly. "I only wish to walk beside you, if you allow me." Valara's chest tightened, a warmth spreading through her that she could not name. For centuries, she had believed that humans were crude, thoughtless, and incapable of real care. Now she realized that this human, this one, was capable of something deeper than she had imagined. The palace walls, once confining and cold, began to feel less like prisons and more like spaces they could share. Valara felt her fear slowly melting into trust, her doubts softening into hope. She still had questions, still carried the weight of her people's expectations, and still feared the unknown. Yet Kale's presence offered a quiet certainty that she was not alone, that someone could care without demanding, that connection could exist without fear. By the end of the week, Valara had laughed more than she had in decades, spoken more than she had in years, and felt emotions she could not yet name. The human she had dreaded, the one she had expected to be clumsy, loud, and uncaring, was becoming the person she could not imagine being without. And in that realization, in the simple moments of shared laughter, quiet walks, and careful gestures, Valara began to understand something she had never known before, that love was not only about grand declarations or duty. It was in the small acts, the attention given without expectation, the care offered freely, and the courage to remain gentle even in a world that demanded strength. Kale had not yet won her heart entirely, but he had touched it in ways no one ever had. And for Valara, that was a beginning more beautiful and terrifying than she could have imagined. Weeks passed, and Valara's world had begun to change in subtle ways. She no longer approached Kale with only dread or suspicion. She had started to trust him, even smile at his clumsy jokes, even share small secrets from her past. But their fragile peace was about to be tested. The elders summoned them to the Great Hall, a towering chamber filled with the echoes of centuries of tradition. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp, and their expectations clear. Kale was to prove his worthiness in the trials of the Zirithian world, an ancient set of challenges that tested strength, patience, and understanding of their culture. It was dangerous, even deadly, designed to discourage humans. Many had failed before, unable to endure the trials or understand the subtleties of their customs. Valara's heart sank. She had grown to care for Kale, but fear gripped her. She had seen the storm in his world and the trials in hers, and now both converged in a moment that could shatter everything. "Kale," she whispered as they stood together, I cannot bear to see you hurt." Kale took her hand, firm and warm. "Valara, I am ready. Not for the elders, not for the trials, but for you. For us." His words carried conviction, a quiet bravery that did not rely on strength alone. Valara felt a lump in her throat. She had seen humans struggle, fail, and recover, but she had never seen such determination rooted in care rather than duty. The first trial was a test of endurance. Kale faced harsh winds that tore through the cliffs where the elders had placed him, and lightning that split the skies above. Valara watched, her breath caught in her chest, her hands trembling as she hovered over the protective shields from her vantage point. He faltered, stumbled, yet he pressed on. Not with brute force, but with awareness, patience, and persistence. Every time he wavered, he reminded himself why he had begun, not for honor, Not for reward, but for Valara, for the life they might share. The second trial demanded understanding of Xerithian culture. Kale had to recite the sacred texts, perform precise gestures, and demonstrate respect for traditions he barely knew. Valara's eyes filled with tears as she saw him concentrate, stumbling at first, but correcting himself patiently. He asked questions, observed carefully, and when he made mistakes, he did not falter in dignity. Valara realized that this human strength was not in his knowledge or skill, but in his humility, his willingness to learn, and his respect for her world. Finally came the test of courage. Kale was placed before the Chamber of Shadows, a place where fears manifested as illusions. Many humans had turned back, paralyzed by terror. Valara's heart thudded painfully as Kale entered. Moments later, she heard his steady voice calling out, facing each illusion with clarity and calm. He moved through the darkness, guided not by arrogance, but by the knowledge that he was not alone. Valara's presence, her trust, and her hope illuminated the path for him. When he emerged, weary but unbroken, the elders stared in astonishment. None could deny what they had witnessed. Kale, a human, had not only survived but had excelled, not because he was like them, but because he had brought his own kind of strength, courage rooted in care, patience in learning, and respect that transcended differences. Valara ran to him, throwing herself into his arms, tears streaming freely. You did it," she whispered, her voice shaking. You've shown them. Shown me." Kale held her close, smiling through exhaustion. "I only did what I promised. I walked beside you. That's all I ever wanted." In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was more than victory in trials. It was the recognition that the bond they had formed was unbreakable. Not through obligation, not through fear, but through understanding, patience, and the quiet power of care. The elders, their expressions softening, nodded in respect. "The human has passed," they said, their voices carrying approval. "Not because he is like us, but because he has shown the strength of heart that transcends worlds." Valara pulled back slightly, looking into Kale's eyes. "I feared you," she admitted softly. I thought humans could never understand us. But you are different. You are extraordinary." Kale smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you are stronger than you know. You let me walk with you. That is what made everything possible." For the first time, Valara realized the truth she had been afraid to face. The human she had dreaded had become the human she could trust, rely on, and perhaps even love. And as the stars shimmered above, their worlds so different, so separate, had begun to merge in a bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than duty, stronger than any trial the universe could impose.